Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming. I'm Angela Crossman, Interim Dean of Faculty. I think probably you guys know that. And I'm here with my colleagues and I'm going to let them introduce themselves, but we're going to talk about our COACHE 2023 recommendations. So, Chloe.
Hello, my name is Chloe. I'm an assistant professor in sociology department. It's my third year starting, so I am excited to be here serving as a coach, and I will Matthew.
Hi, everyone. I'm Matthew Perry from the history department. So I think I know or have met, I think, most people here, but so I'm happy to be here, happy to be working with the COACHE committee. Okay.
Judy-Lynne.
Hi, I'm Judy-Lynne Peters. I'm a lecturer in the Department of Public Management, and I am in my third round of COACHE survey reviews. And this is an exciting time. I think you've got some very interesting findings to share with you.
Christopher.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Christopher Schults, Vice President for Institutional Effectiveness and Strategy. Recently added to the COACHE group, had an opportunity to be a major part of 2 cycles at BMCC, and I'm excited to be able to share today at the end a little bit on how we're going to be making use of this data for larger institutional purposes.
Thank you. And we have, just to add, Gabriel Camacho, Yeju, and Mohammad Islam are members as well. They couldn't join us today, but they are also members of our group. So I'm going to go ahead and start sharing a little presentation here. Oops, share screen first. There we go. Okay. Oops, there it is. Okay. Chloe.
Yes, so for those of you who may not be familiar with COACHE, I'm just going to give some explanation. So COACHE stands for Collaborative on Academic Careers in Higher Education. The COACHE survey is basically designed to enhance our understanding of our experiences as faculty members at John Jay. So the COACHE survey assesses faculty satisfaction across 25 benchmark domains, such as the nature of work, facilities and work resources, policies and benefits, interdisciplinary work, collaboration and mentoring, tenure and promotion, leadership, governance and department, and appreciation and recognition. And we have a COACHE working group for this survey. The group basically reads the reports, discusses themes as we see, and probes concerns raised in the survey, and we make recommendations to the college to address them. And previous COACHE survey results have actually helped us make meaningful changes. Like, for instance, it helped us create the associate to the provost position, now called interim dean of faculty, and shaped many other practices in academic affairs at John Jay. Like, for instance, in response to COACHE 2019 survey, the working group has made recommendations, and John Jay actually had made those changes, and those are the following list that we did. Like, for instance, John Jay increased regular communication with faculty member, meaning more faculty social opportunities. And the college is giving an annual award for faculty services to the college. The college has increased distinguished teaching award amount. And the college is also sending targeted information to faculty about relevant research resources. They also provided regular assessment of personal process outcomes, and it's ongoing. And the college makes effort to broadly recruit underrepresented faculty to align with our goals. And they enhance search committee training on best practices in inclusive hiring. And John Jay also increased support for faculty to reach their goals in terms of funding, workshops, and mentoring. And John Jay also increased support and training for chairs and program directors. The next slide.
So in terms of the results that we found in the 2023 survey, this was essentially repetition of the 2019, but the best aspects of working at the college were geographic location, quality of colleagues, academic freedom, and quality of undergraduates. And the worst aspects were the same as before, just reordered slightly: compensation, teaching load, too much service or too many assignments, and cost of living. Highlights. And then just to give you a sense of what the benchmark means looked like, comparing the 2019 to the 2023 results, I just want to highlight that just a note about the data. So again, the survey, whoever does it, right? And it's a cross-sectional sample. So you may not have the same people who filled it out in 2019 and 2023. There may be some who are consistent. There are some who may not be. And also the data are agree to disagree scale. So these are means which have limited meaning in that context. But with that background, just to show across the board, the means were actually slightly higher or unchanged statistically in all of these benchmarks between the two iterations of the survey. And then, so this is work, service, teaching and research, facilities and resources, personnel and family policies, health and retirement benefits, interdisciplinary work, collaboration, mentoring, tenure policies, tenure clarity, and promotion to full. And then this is the other benchmarks. And here we see, again, the same thing, increase or no change, except in terms of departmental leadership, where we saw a decrease, which because 2020 intervened between the two iterations, one might wonder if it's related to COVID. But the CUNY data don't show a decline in leadership developmental. So that was something that was striking to the committee in terms of the findings. Okay, Chloe.
Yes, so these are the key 2023 findings that the working group found. So we decided to explore a little more using qualitative survey and focus group conversation. So the first one is that we realized that there was lower satisfaction for Asian faculty members in more benchmarks than 2019. And the second, we realized that there was a lower satisfaction rate with the departments, as you saw between the 2019 and 2023. And third, we noticed more frequent large differences that were found for tenured associates and the women faculty members. And fourth, we realized that there were some issues around campus engagement, civility, and community, as well as recognition in terms of teaching and service. So based on these key findings, we decided to explore a little more. And these are basically the methodology we took from summer 2022 to fall 2024. You guys will all get the slides so you can look at it later so that we can a little bit focus more on the goals that we found.
Okay, so the COACHE working group, based on our analysis of the data, based on kind of the outreach and the focus groups that Chloe just described, we've come up with 4 goals, and under these 4 goals, 11 objectives to address faculty satisfaction. And our next step is that the committee will be putting together a report of our findings, as well as with our goals and objectives, and then making some suggestions for potential activities or actions that the college can take to address these objectives. And this is I guess the big part of our session today, is to share these goals and objectives with you, to hear your comments, get your feedback or ideas about potential activities. So anything that you kind of have to say or add to this, we would really love to hear. So I'm going to introduce the first goal and objectives, and then we'll take a little time to see if anyone in attendance, again, has any comments or suggestions. So goal number 1, transparency to facilitate greater equity. And under this goal, we have 3 objectives: focus on sharing resource information, for example, department resource allocation, to broadly facilitate equity of access to opportunities within departments. Focus on encouraging departments to increase equity with and across departments in terms of service and other assignments. And focus on making relevant information highly accessible to faculty. Priorities here will be support and membership around CCE and tenure and promotion, particularly for women, faculty of color, including Asian faculty, and information and support for international faculty, and information on affinity groups. And our working group has started. We've put together, just as kind of a sampling of some potential activities to address these some potential activities to address these objectives, and you can see those over on the right. But now we would like to kind of open the floor to you. So does anyone have any, again, comments on the goals or objectives, any suggestions for potential activity? So please either raise your hand or just unmute and speak out. Okay, I see Allison.
Thank you. And what you may not know is this is the first time I'm seeing these. So I'm excited and interested. What I want to say is I'm not sure I understand entirely what you're proposing here, and I want to make sure I do. So because it seems like what you're suggesting is that this transparency and equity work needs to occur in the departments specifically, or at least we should be encouraging departments to do this. I mean, again, as provost, it's like I can either try and do some of this myself, but I'm seeing the word department in each of these. And so I'm like, how can I help the departments facilitate that work? Thank you.
I can say that in some of the focus groups, faculty members did complain that there wasn't transparency at the department level. We also did hear on the survey that there wasn't enough transparency across the college. So I think it's both. But we did hear a lot about in departments, people don't understand how resources are allocated, how classes are assigned, that sort of thing.
Okay, thank you.
And then I think one of the kind of actions or activities, right, that the working group is kind of working with is maybe coming up with best practices or suggestions, right, for departments in terms of transparency, sharing this type of information.
Yep.
Okay, Sam.
Hi, thanks for sharing this. One thing I'm noticing the word online in this slide, and I think as we all know, the college website is an absolute disaster. And using Inside John Jay is also like stepping into 2003 on the internet. And so I'm just curious, you know, where things are at with website and Inside John Jay development, because I think the difficulty of accessing anything through the John Jay website right now, I think creates this feeling too of a lack of transparency.
I'm happy to respond to that. I had hoped it was improving. So I think what would be helpful is if we arrange a session with faculty members and so let me just say this, we also are hopefully hiring now a website person. I think we've extended that offer. I think that person will be coming on board soon. But I think it would be a good idea when that person comes on board to have this kind of session so they can hear what the challenges are early on in their tenure here.
Okay, sorry, I got like dropped from the Zoom for a second, so I missed the last part. But is there anyone else who has any comments or suggestions here about goal 1 or the activities? Okay, well then why don't we move on to
just quickly.
Sure.
I can add that, you know, and I'll talk about this towards the end, but we're really focusing much more on data visualization tools at the college, and you will see those much broader moving forward. And I think in seeing that and with it being accessible to department chairs and faculty, hopefully there will be greater questions as the data becomes more transparent and more visible as well.
And I love your little thumbs that floated up. That was very cool.
That was new to me too.
Yeah.
All right, should we move on to goal 2? All right. So goal 2, increase awareness and support for Asian faculty. And again, this is in direct response to a trend that we saw, that faculty satisfaction scores across many benchmarks were lower in 2023 for Asian faculty. We have 3 objectives here. Given our growing Asian student and faculty population, increased focus on, attention to, support for, and visibility of Asian faculty. Acknowledge Asian faculty as faculty of color in discussing DEI initiatives, and increase opportunities for connections among Asian faculty. And then again, a sampling of potential activities, publicizing faculty accomplishments, inclusion on committees and events, especially those directly related to DEI initiatives, and facilitating the creation of affinity groups, and then helping to host and support these groups. Okay, are there any, again, comments, suggestions, ideas?
Other than I welcome the suggestions and how we can support them.
Okay, great. Okay, well then I will pass this to Judy-Lynne then to go to goal 3.
Okay, our feedback has led us to a lot of discussions about the fact that leadership in departments suffered during the pandemic. So we made it a priority. One of the priorities we came up with was developing leadership across the college. Not only will this benefit people who are in current leadership positions, but also create a pipeline for people who currently are not serving in leadership positions, because one of the problems we find is that people who are doing things get stuck doing them, and people who want to lead find no path to leadership. So our 2 objectives here are to focus on enhanced chair training and accountability, so that there is consistent and clear instruction for the chairs, because one of the complaints were that people from department to department did different things. We also want to focus on development opportunities for all faculty to build transferable leadership skills, not just to become chairs, but to head committees, to take on roles in programs, etc. And we have a list of potential activities, but as Matt said earlier, we welcome any more ideas or suggestions you may have.
I don't know who else, but besides Allison and Angela were in the conversation this morning, but one of the things that I hope gets on the list is equipping faculty with the skills to facilitate difficult conversations. That was mentioned a lot in the panel discussion this morning.
That is very important. And that sort of leads us to, unless there's something else here, I'm going to go to the next slide. I think that's where that really falls. Departmental collegiality and departmental quality, both, as I said before, those benchmarks slid a bit during the interim between the last 4 years. So we had lots of discussions with faculty about the new John Jay, where we're going to land as a college post-pandemic. I think there's a lot of tension between being on campus, being off campus. There's a lot of tension around rebuilding the community that John Jay was famous for having years ago. And so we're looking for a way to have clear communication around issues such as dispute resolution across constituencies. We're looking to develop a structure so faculty and staff can report to the college when there's bullying or other forms of incivility, to provide accountability, and engage in college-wide discussions in departments across constituencies about how to engage meaningfully and equitably in rebuilding the campus community. And this was a really big point, because there was a lot of debate about, we sort of know we have to return to campus, but we should do that thoughtfully and purposefully, so that we're not coming to campus for a 1 hour meeting, that we want to be on campus. We want to be here to engage in real important stuff, but there's real important stuff we can be doing from home. And there are ways where we need to negotiate this so that all constituencies are satisfied. The college seems to have accommodated staff with a flexible schedule, and the faculty doesn't seem to have that. So we're looking for more feedback on this.
I can't help but say that I'm not sure the staff would agree with your assessment that we've accommodated their desire to work more remotely.
Okay. Well, let me put it this way. They have more accommodation. I mean, there's from the administration, it's clear that the accommodation has been made, whether it suits everybody or not. But from the department to department, there seems to be a great disparity in how they're dealing with that question of whether they can work from home or work, they have to come to campus. That question.
And it's interesting that, one of the, each iteration, we have an opportunity to create John Jay specific questions. And one of the questions that we wrote this year, because we saw that in 2019, community was an issue, was given, that COVID introduced new challenges to building community, what types of events, programs, opportunities, policies, or initiatives would you like to see to support rebuilding our vibrant community? And the most endorsed answer was include remote/hybrid in-person meetings, and then events. That was the second highest endorsed. And so the challenge is creating spaces where people are present, but in instances where they can't be physically present, can still engage. And sort of, how do you do that? How do you balance that in a way that actually does create opportunities for a vibrant community where people connect, but that if they, but they can still engage if there's an impediment of some sort. And that's a real challenge, right? And one of the things that I see when I look across CUNY are things like one scheduled day that every department meets, right? Like it's the second Tuesday in every month is when they have department meetings, and that's on a calendar, that's a governance calendar, an administrative calendar, whatever. And that creates the conditions in which maybe people can be planful, stack things, right? And but ideas like that might be the kind of thing that could move us in a direction where people can still engage and, build around, things that bring them to campus, but then allow them to have that flexibility. But that's just one idea. Erica.
Hi, I'm here with Chevy, and she wanted to add a thought.
One of the things that I believe we need to have is an ombudsman, or we may have it, and I don't know who it is. And everyone should be aware of who that person is, because that individual is there on the campus to try to make sure that different parties can pull together. And they're coming at it from the faculty perspective and also from the perspective of the, let me say, human rights? No. Yeah, human rights. So I really believe that we need to have an ombudsman on our campus.
You don't know who they are because we don't have one.
Oops, that's a suggestion, but I know hiring is at an all-time low.
It was a suggestion when we first did our climate survey work back in 2019. But it's not one we've been able to implement because of fiscal constraints.
Okay. Is there any possibility, when the person might want to volunteer, you might have somebody here on campus who's respected enough and interested enough who would volunteer for that position. So I think that we might be able to put out a call and see whether or not we could pull somebody in who would do it. Just a suggestion.
Thank you for the suggestion.
Are we ready for the next slide?
Can I just ask Jennifer about her point? She said that faculty, staff, on-campus presence discrepancy is greatly a matter of perception. That may be true, but faculty I met with were very vocal about the fact that they felt there was a real inequity.
Oh,
If
I'm
you
sure
could
that's
speak to that.
absolutely true. I'm sure that's absolutely true. I'm sure that many faculty, yeah, you're only reporting what the survey has revealed.
Mhm.
I would suggest that if there were a comparable analysis of staff, they would have a different perception. That's my only point. I'm backing up what Carol said. Doesn't take away about what that perception is and that it should be addressed, but
Yeah, but I mean, and for whoever's feeling put out by the situation, it's real enough, and we have to
absolutely,
figure out how to negotiate it. Yeah.
absolutely. No two ways about it, Judy-Lynne.
You know what I don't know, oh, I'm sorry, Allison had her hand up. What I don't know is whether we can share objective data about how many people in what category have accommodations. Because I think that if people had a better understanding, because there are a lot more faculty than people may be aware of who have accommodations. And so I'll have to talk to Oswald about what we can release in terms of general categories, just so people doesn't change how the people's sense of things, Judy-Lynne.
Mhm.
Having facts may be helpful.
I was gonna jump in on this. I had decided earlier just to leave it alone because it is a matter of perception, but to sort of clarify the policies, there are policies for both groups, right? So CUNY mandates the policy for staff, and that's 70% in person out of every 10 days, right? So that means 4 days a week, 1 week, 3 days a week, another. For faculty, the workload policy is that you must teach 1 course on campus per semester. So in theory, faculty who are teaching a hybrid only need to be on campus 1 day a week. My hope is, and I would much rather have a culture where faculty are teaching primarily in person and coming to campus.
Amen.
Right? But so far, by sort of judging by the numbers, the percentages of courses that have been taught online and faculty load, I think the perception seems inequitable with the reality.
Before we move on to the next slide, I just want to sort of highlight and reiterate something that Matt alluded to, and that it's important to understand. We've got, we have our draft recommendations with some draft activities, but this is not the only opportunity that our community is going to have to weigh in and provide feedback. So this is our first sharing of the information broadly, but we will have other chances so that folks really do have an opportunity to weigh in. Because as Judy said, some of us have been doing this for several iterations, in part because it feels like one of the more impactful initiatives that has been beneficial for faculty lives. And so we really do try to pay attention and monitor progress on our initiatives and so forth. So just laying that out. Next, we have Christopher.
Yes, good morning. So I just quickly want to speak to some of the connections of the coach work to the strategic plan currently and our work moving forward. And just very briefly, some of you have heard me speak about this, but we're looking at how we redesign the very concept of institutional effectiveness at John Jay with much more systematic incorporation and integration and presentation of information. And one of those things is an intentional incorporation and alignment of planning and assessment for institutional direction setting. You'll be hearing more about operational planning moving forward, which is really about the divisions setting out priorities for the year and then making sure that the assessments within the areas are aligning. Obviously, for academic affairs, that's going to require partnership, which exists now, but will only be extended in working directly with the chairs, coordinators, and faculty. I know Diana in our office has already been meeting with more departments and I know we've got a meeting, I think next week or the week after, where we'll start talking about these things all the way down to the level of curriculum mapping, which obviously is a part of direction setting as well. greater alignment of planning, assessment of research and data. There were some good examples from the actions that were described as to how some initiatives are already in place. Things have already been started based on the data that's been gathered from COACHE. But we would like to, moving forward, make sure that we're more intentional in how we align that work, again, with operational planning at the division level, and really making sure that we're able to sort of align assessments where possible towards, you know, more targeted priority areas. The greater focus on data visualization and supporting a culture of inquiry. So I don't know how many of you have ever looked at the fact book that we produce. My guess is not as many folks as we would like to have been looking at it. Part of the reason is it's something like 70 pages of tables. And so one of the things we're working on right now, and it will be hopefully completed in the next few weeks, is turning the entire fact book into a Power BI, where you can choose groups you want to look at. You can basically create your own tables and print them out. That way you're getting the information that you're most interested in at the level you're interested in. And that way we make sure that we've got the same numbers for certain categories around the college. Also recently we took the DFWI reports and we put those into Power BI and we shared that. That's just the beginning. We want folks to be comfortable with the numbers and to be able to manipulate the numbers into the graphs that they're looking to see. And we're really focusing on how we leverage our institutional data sources. And that's going to be a big part of our strategic planning process. The strategic planning subcommittee started meeting in the spring, and we've talked about some of the data sources that we're going to be using to help inform the development of the next strategic plan, the goals and the objectives. And you'll notice, as you see here, the COACHE survey is one of the things that are on there. The NESE, National Study for Student Engagement. We've been gathering that data for a number of years, but we haven't necessarily been as intentional as we could be in how we utilize that to help us determine what priority actions we want to set and focus on supporting students. The NIST work that was done, we have, which now we're calling student success work. We have 4 groups. They're going to be coming up with recommendations utilizing data, and that's going to be a big part of strategic planning. And some of you may not be aware, and I think it's pertinent to discuss, that we actually do have a staff satisfaction survey now. We're doing it for the first time. It's been open for about 4 weeks. We are hoping to get about a 25 to 30% response rate. We're not quite there yet, but we're pushing for it. And thank you to Carol for sending out reminders to folks. We're right now we're at about 14-ish, 15-ish%. So we're hoping in the next week and a half we can get there. But this is a survey that's designed very similar to the COACHE, and it's something that BMCC, I helped to lead 2 iterations of it. And so it will be very interesting to see for some of these questions that are similar, just what the perceptions are. And frankly, the conversation about the perceptions with the data from these surveys, I think will be helpful as we think about how we design the next strategic plan with goals and objectives that are about creating and ensuring we have a supportive environment for our faculty and staff in supporting student success. So with our current strategic plan, I just wanted to kind of show, and it's beautiful when things like this happen, right? It wasn't necessarily the intention that the current strategic plan was going to be aligned with the kind of information that we get from COACHE, but lo and behold, it is with each of these areas. So, you know, with educating and supporting undergraduate and graduate students at every step of their John Jay journey, which is goal 1 of our strategic plan. We have objectives that are about aligning and scaffolding instructional practices in gen ed and major courses. Obviously, the information we get from COACHE is related to that, expanding curricular and extracurricular opportunities for experiential learning, creative research, production, and increasing the size of full-time faculty. Obviously, all of those objectives are connected. We see the same thing when we look at creating and advancing knowledge, embodying and promoting our values of equity, diversity, and inclusion, and improving and expanding financial resiliency. Even there's actually an objective in there which speaks to how we utilize space. And that's one of the things that we really need to think about intentionally and strategically as a college, is how do we use space to support faculty development, extracurricular activities, student success efforts. That's all a part of it. And then for those who have not seen it, CUNY last year came up with their 2023 to 2030 strategic plan, which is called Uplifting New York. There are 4 different goals. And for each of those goals, there are initiatives where the data that we gather, the information that we get from the coach can be helpful in helping us as a college to understand the degree to which we are delivering on those initiatives. And for those who aren't aware, we now have an annual process. We were actually 2 weeks ago now, I think it was, a number of us were at CUNY Central to provide a verbal report over 2 hours describing the degree to which we are connecting. And the thing is, moving forward, data from COACHE and what we've done with it, the initiatives, that's going to be a part of our story and our narrative on how we are making change and going with evidence-based practices. You will never hear me say data-driven decisions because data is important, but we need to make sure that all aspects of our environment and our culture are considered, and that data is important and evidence is important. But we have to make sure that we're looking at perceptions and how people are interpreting in their experiences as well. So information like that we get from the coach, from the NESI, from the staff satisfaction, understanding the degree to which people feel supported, cared for, a sense of belonging, appreciated, recognized, all of these sorts of things. We cannot be serious about student success unless we're serious about supporting those. And these tools help to give us information to understand how we can better support everyone. So I just wanted to quickly share that those connections exist and the ways in which we're going to strengthen these connections and be much more intentional moving forward. And we will be communicating broadly in a lot of different ways. I'm happy to hear from this group and other groups on how we can do a better job of communicating this information as well. That's all I got, Angela.
Thank you. So we have, let's see, we have some time, but we just wanted to highlight that if you do have questions, you know, feel free to reach out to any individual member of the group, you know, and ask away. We're happy to respond to questions and provide information about what we've done, what we're doing. You know, we have, you know, more data. We didn't show all the data because we showed it at the last faculty development day, but we're happy to walk through any part of the survey. And also, just so you're aware, I know we've mentioned Inside John Jay, but the coach information is posted inside John Jay. That includes the 2023 results and the prior report and the 2019 results. There's all kinds of information. And so you can see what we proposed last time. And updates and so forth. So that information is accessible to you anytime you want to dig deeper. And then this is the highlighting that we're having the next the next community discussion at 12:40 in the moot court, and then lunch in the dining hall west. So I'm going to stop sharing momentarily and then just say, invite more discussion, questions, and also say thank you. Oops, I forgot to stop sharing.
This is great. Can you email out the slide deck?
Sure.
Thank you.
And just so everybody's aware, at the end of the slide deck are the actual data slides. But we talked and we figured we didn't want to bore the heck out of everybody by just presenting a bunch of data. We wanted to have a conversation, but it is there and it will be shared with everyone.
Actually, you know what? I'm going to indulge a little tiny bit because there is one thing that I like that I think is nice to see. Which, you know, I mentioned that we had one difference that was, this is our response rate. But when we look at the CUNY comparisons, I just like to see all the green in John Jay's column, which, you know, when we look at across CUNY, we aren't doing so bad, right? We have a lot of positives that show up in our results. And I think that's worth recognizing and appreciating. You know, we made a lot of intentional efforts to try to really support faculty in a lot of different ways. And I feel like it shows. So I'm just thought I'd indulge and show that very briefly because it's just a lot of nice green. But as Christopher pointed out, it's really helpful that we think about places where we can double down and make the green greener and places where it's red, where we really need to pay attention and even more intentional about how we address some of the concerns. You see service, nature of work service is something that is an area that we want to be thinking about. We have big and small departments where the service load's different, and we have variation as we've spoken to that we saw in our focus groups and in the qualitative survey that we ran, where people don't always feel like there's equity in service in their departments. And so addressing that and hitting those reds is something that we want to be working on. But I just thought I'd share this, and I will we will share this out. But just highlighting those because it's nice to see where we compare favorably in the CUNYverse. Any other questions?
I just say thank you for this. I look forward to this every year, to hearing what we can learn from the coach survey. So that your work is extremely helpful and much needed. So thank you for those of you who served on the committee, and thank you for those who showed up to hear about it. And I love that you're going to continue to have conversations about it.
If I can follow that and simply say, ditto what she said. No, this is actionable information. I really love the way that the coach working group works with the very concrete recommendations. Could be more concrete. But the very specific, like these are the areas where we can make improvements, because then I just know what to do, right? I am sort of an action-oriented person. I think people probably know that if they worked with me for long enough. And so I'm like, okay, here's my mandate, right? And so I'm going to work on these things. And so thank you for the time and effort that went into thinking it through and talking it over.
And I would just highlight that the way the committee is structured is that it has 2 full professors, 2 associate professors, 2 assistant professors, 2 lecturers, and couple administrators who help facilitate and give depth, as Christopher has done. So if you're looking for a great service opportunity, keep your eyes peeled because it's a really great committee. Erica.
I also wanted to say, like, this really works, the coach survey, because there are years where things are really identified. I mean, like the parking, I don't know if you remember that, but that is important to me. And like knowing that that's an issue that faculty and staff are concerned about, and that you all address it in finding different things. I think health and wellness was another thing, how to do this, so I hope that the committee will continue to work and to identify ways to make our day-to-day lives as workers and people who come every day better. I think that's what's most important.
And actually, I'll just quickly, so we followed a similar approach with the staff satisfaction, is that we had representation from each of the divisions, and we tried to make sure that we were getting across the HEO classifications and college assistants and others as well. I think it'll be interesting down the road to possibly have some cross conversations with these 2 groups, because there's some commonalities that I think could provide some interesting opportunities to greatly impact sort of the overall environment. And I think what I learned, and a lot of us learned during COVID, is just how much respect faculty and staff can really have for each other, and how many opportunities there are to really work with each other. And I'd like to continue to ride that momentum and just find more opportunities to do it. So it would be great to think about ways in which these groups can continue their work intentionally together moving forward.
One of the things that came up in our faculty discussions was the need for faculty to support staff and vice versa. So I'm looking forward to hearing what you come up with in that study.
And Judy-Lynne, I know we're running out of time today, but I'd love to hear more about what that conversation looked like when it came up, and what kinds of things came out of that in some more detail.
Okay, we do promise faculty to attend these things, that they're totally anonymous, but I can discuss in generalities, yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And for those wondering, the staff survey is so anonymous. I wanted to try to come up with some incentive plan to encourage people to do the survey. because it's new. Coach, people know, and I think the response rate is really good for us with the coach. And I thought about coming up with some reward system for those who participated until Aisha in my office said, well, if it's anonymous, how are you going to know? And we could not figure out a way where we could at least know who completed it without knowing any results. So please assure everybody that the staff survey is so anonymous. We couldn't figure out a way to incentivize people to submit it.
I would just add one thing, because I saw that the Chronicle had higher ed had a regular survey of staff, and the response rates were like this big, because some of it, people would say they were afraid to respond. But one thing we sometimes do in classes is say, if we get beyond a certain percent response or a certain response rate, everybody gets a something. Right. So that might be one way to do it. It's a harnessing the collective good. And I just saw a research study about that today, where kids, when you set that up like that, kids cooperated more when you set it up like everybody wins if everybody participates. So
40% if you get a pizza party?
Well, pizza party, exactly.
Hey.
Just say that I was paying for this incentive out of my own pocket. So that just interesting concept.
Yeah. So just an idea. But Judy, we do have a good 5 to 10 minutes if there are highlights that you wanted to share about.
Well, one of the issues that came up was bullying, of department leadership bullying the staff, well, bullying faculty as well. But the staff felt they had more of a voice, but staff was being bullied and treated badly by department leadership and by some senior faculty. And the faculty members who talked about this felt that they didn't really know how to help the person who was being bullied. They weren't in a position to really address it. And I've heard from other people who said they've seen that. So, I think the staff sort of knows they could go to the union, they can email Carol, they can run up and see Angela, whatever. And particularly during the pandemic, this was a bigger problem. I haven't heard much about what happened after the pandemic. But as we began to come back to campus, the people who were here, because when we first came back, a lot of people weren't here, just the people who had to be. The faculty who were here, put a lot on the shoulders of the college assistants and the HEOs and whoever who are on campus. So that was mainly it. There are some departments that had more problem than others, but that was mentioned to me frequently. And they also felt that it was important that the college have a response to an issue that wasn't going to be different for, if you're a faculty member and somebody's bullying you, there's this system to help you, but there wasn't the same level of response for a staff member. They wanted everybody to be treated fairly and to know that the college took everybody's complaints seriously, not just the complaints of somebody with a higher rank and tenure. That was mainly it.
That's very helpful. Thank you. And the challenge we've got is, and I see Allison's note about mentioning this to Oswald. It is something we can think about. And it's also the challenge is, how do we share information when things get addressed, which we tend not to because of different concerns about privacy things, but thinking about how do we make sure people understand and see that concerns do get addressed, even though only those who are actually involved ever get the resolution. Does that make sense?
Yeah, if I could quickly, I'm glad this is being brought up and discussed. It's not just a John Jay issue by any stretch. When I was helping to support the Leadership Development Institute that was done for chairs CUNY-wide, the first case study that we wrote addressed specifically how when we went remote with COVID, it was 3 days after faculty and students were sent home that staff were. And there were 3 days that staff were still on campuses. And I can tell you that the leadership at Central was good with me keeping that in the case study as a point of emphasis for how there's inequities across the system. And if we don't call them out, and if we're not intentional about calling them out and finding ways to address them, we allow these things to continue. And then frankly, even the good things that are done get lost in the wash because people are going to focus on the things that impact them the most, right? And we made, I mean, I wrote it from my experience, which was I sent my staff home. And I stayed at the college because I needed to. I felt like in my position, but I didn't want them there, right? And then it was, we're going to address the consequences later. And I wasn't the only person to do that kind of stuff. But that technically meant were policies being followed, you know? But it was about people. And when policies come up against people, that's something that as administrators and as an administration, we got to know about and we got to try to work on. So I'm glad that was brought up. That's an important area to discuss.
I think we all need to model the justice we want our students to walk out of here and practice.
So I'm gonna jump in. Since Carol shared my direct message to her, I will say, I do think there is a gap in terms of handling faculty to staff bullying. I don't think we have a direct pathway or route for handling that. I will also say that in terms of faculty bullying, period, it is something that Angela and I are really working on combating instantly when it is reported to us and trying to create accountability. I'll say it feels, I think to some people, it feels like arbitrary justice because we have just started this last year. We're like, all right, we can't do this anymore. We can't just sit around. We've got to have penalties for when these behaviors come. And so I have enforced some of that and people are feeling the consequences. But I do hope that if I continue to enforce an accountability and a zero tolerance for that kind of behavior between faculty or amongst faculty, that will help sort of change people's behavior. I'm hoping.
And do we have trainings on bullying, like, well, because we were wondering, what does it look like? How do we know? I mean, I've been, so I don't know, but other people may have questions about what it is that you're referencing.
Well, I'm not gonna talk about what she's referencing, but you'll see an email about the mandatory trainings we all have to take.
I was gonna say, you didn't get that email?
If people actually took them, it would be.
I actually read it.
What'd you say, Judy-Lynne?
I read it.
Yep.
I read it.
And I recognize that, you know, it is tedious because it's the exact same material every single year, which means we all ought to get 100% on the tests every year. But it is helpful reminder because people forget to think about what we're supposed to do here. But I think that what you're asking for is a step above that. In terms of, and there was a discussion that several of us were in earlier today about civility and whatnot, and it was an interesting, you know, there was an interesting comment about some discussions ought to be uncivil, and I think that was a nice play on that word. It doesn't mean disrespectful, but that we ought to be able to challenge each other, but do it in a respectful way. And so I think there are things that we can and should do. And I hope that these 40-minute, where is Gina, these 40-minute sessions, I hope we can figure out a way to have them throughout the year and longer because they're much too short for these important topics. Sam's got her hand up.
Oh, sure. Yeah, just on the bullying and the training, I agree with you, Carol, that it's tedious to do the same trainings every year. But one complaint I've heard from faculty, and I know I have myself, is that a lot of times these are more geared towards corporate environments. And so the scenarios, there's one that is more academic, like an academic environment, but I think that is also where there's a disconnect in these trainings is, you know, why am I watching something in like an office setting where people are working in cubicles? That's not how we work here. So that isn't the trainings themselves that way aren't always so helpful. And I just want to say to your other point, Carol, about notifying when things are resolved. As disappointing as the outcome was about the situation with the 4 professors, I personally really appreciated the update, you know, having known these people and engaged with their work over the years. So that was helpful just to know that had closure, disappointing as it was.
Thank you. That was really helpful to hear. And about the corporate nature of the trainings, some of the trainings, like the eSpark CUNY produces itself. I think some of the other training, because these are mandated by the state for us, you know, they've got a broad swath, but I will say, you know, the one corporate one that I find helpful is as much as painful as it is a reminder, particularly in this world we live in today, about what do we do if there are active shooter things and stuff like that. And so I think that what we need to think about is what we can create for our own community and not have to simply rely on what's available at CUNY, knowing that we still got to do the mandatory things. But again, to me, they're a floor, not a ceiling, and we can think about what do we need to do institutionally otherwise. So for example, I know that Gabriella Leal and a couple of other schools are working together to do something on the hate training we're required to have because nobody's producing it right now. And so they're coming up with something like that. So we can think about those things as well. And I'll put that on their growing list.
Samaya?
Yeah, based on a lot of the different conversations that we've been having here, one thing that occurred to me is that in terms of creating more synergy, not just between faculty and administration, but also the staff, it just occurred to me that, for example, the conversation that happened right before this one has been referenced several times, and it seems like it was a great conversation and an important conversation, not just for faculty, but for people in general who are part of the college community. But the reality is that many of the staff aren't able to participate in a conversation like that because it is the day before classes begin, right? So there's a lot of people who are still in the midst of doing all kinds of work to make sure that students are ready to go tomorrow, right? But an idea is, can there be a possibility in the future where we can think of an opportunity to have this conversation, right? Or something akin to Faculty Development Day, but it's like for the entire community too. That includes both faculty and staff, and we're not being asked, right? The faculty can come on a day like today and do this because they're not yet taxed with having to teach their classes. The equivalent isn't quite there for staff. So can we make it so that both groups can come together and partake and have these conversations and know that this is part of what is expected as part of their work?
I think those are great ideas and things that we can use January and the summer for staff in particular, when we're here 12 months. And I think that as Allison reminded me years ago that I now try to remember to do every year, but the faculty staff conversation we're supposed to have each semester. We've got some ideas about how we're going to use those in the context of some of these conversations. You know, last year the theme was around the budget and finances. We're going to use this semester to talk about the free speech issues, Title VI issues. But I like the idea of having some other opportunities. And Gina and I had a conversation this morning on our way into the civility conversation about how do we keep having these conversations throughout the year. They're not one-offs, and she's got a great agenda planned. I know Mindy thinks about these things, Mindy Boxstein, and has a number of conversations. I know that academic affairs and research and other people, the good news is there's so many things that happen that we're not all able to attend. The good news is we have a lot of things that's going on, and that hopefully that expands the reach of people, even if you can't do everything. I think I need to depart.
Yeah, we're at time. So synergy opportunity for our 12:40 community discussion, 1:30 lunch in the student dining hall, and then the welcome back reception at 4. All opportunities for everybody to mingle. So hope to see you all, and thank you very much for coming, and we'll share more about Coach very soon. And thanks to my wonderful committee.